This day has been all over the place, but we are going to start with the biggest domino that we were all waiting to fall. I mean, this is the discussion at the Combine last week. This was going to be the biggest kind of moment that happened early in free agency to dictate how the quarterback market will go, how certain teams decided to spend, and that is Kirk Cousins officially landing with the Atlanta Falcons on a 4-year deal worth $180 million per Tom Pelissero. $100 million guaranteed, $50 million signing bonus, as Diana said, $45 million per year in 2024 and 2025. This is a massive deal for Kirk Cousins, but not necessarily a surprise. It's a natural markup on the Derek Carr deal. It's in the same range as the Daniel Jones deal, and this is why it was always going to be difficult for the Vikings to keep him, because there was going to be some team that was looking at a short-term window and was needing an upgrade that was willing to go to this place for Kirk Cousins. And Atlanta absolutely made sense when that market started to form here over the last few weeks.
Yeah, the Carr deal, his previous deal, part duh. Like this just feels like his last extension, just again, with some natural market inflation, with the cap going up and everything. And I think Greg Rosenthal from NFL Network put it best, where he said essentially the Daniel Jones deal with a little bit of inflation, and then that little $10 million sweetener. It's like a 2-year deal plus one. Like it's a 2+1 kind of deal. So when you break it down that way, yeah, this makes total sense. That's exactly, he is going to get whatever the cap of this market was, or the top of this market, and that's what it is. It's the natural progression of the last one he signed. So this is a great pick for him because of the young talent the Falcons have, with a workable offensive line as well, which I'm sure Kirk Cousins has a lot of experience with. Not so workable offensive lines in Minnesota. Had a decent one last year, though. Decent weapons with Drake London, Kyle Pitts, hopefully fully healthy, Bijan Robinson. It should be a strong run game. The play action, the offensive system, there is no translation needed. This is the offense he's been in for his entire life as a professional. So I think it makes total sense, and the money makes total sense, and it makes sense for the Falcons as well, wanting that type of upgrade and where they're selected in the draft. This makes all the sense in the world.
Like you said, Zach Robinson is their offensive coordinator, comes from Los Angeles, obviously, where Kevin O'Connell came from. So it's going to be shared language, shared ideas. It's going to be a very easy transition for him. My only thought about this is now you're going for the immediate upgrade route rather than the theoretical upside route in the draft. You had the 8th overall pick. Could you have been in range to go get the 4th quarterback or trade up for one of these other quarterbacks? Them not deciding to do that lets me into their thinking that they didn't love those guys, maybe beyond that first tier of quarterbacks. And so by going to get Kirk here, you're giving yourself a 2-year window, essentially, to maximize the savings you're getting on some of those young draft picks. Kyle Pitts is still cheap. Drake London's still cheap. So now when you're going to have to eventually pay those guys, you're probably going to have to transition to a cheaper quarterback. Yep. Whether you can do that if you're a borderline playoff team and you're picking in the 20s, that's the existential question all of these teams have to face when you're going for the short-term upgrade. It's going to be hard to pivot away from this, but it doesn't seem like that's the most important thing on the Falcons' agenda.
And Chicago gets a decent amount of construction. I know we do in Las Vegas. Is building new off ramps are expensive, and that's what you're doing. You're just building yourself off ramps every year, going like, okay, in 2 years we'll make sure. Is there a guy we can transition to, or we do 1-on-1? Like with an older guy and a young guy. Okay, but all right, at least we give ourselves space for a season or two, and just have an answer there to have backups on the roster. It's like, okay, I wish we could just get off the carousel that we see all these other teams getting on. That's the price you have to pay for that.
Seems like the best case scenario here is what's going on with Jared Goff in Detroit, right? Goff is only $30 million a year for the last couple of years, but we've obviously had a huge $50 million-ish spike in the cap. So you're in a general similar range where it's, the back half of the top 10 in terms of quarterback pay. And that's worked out well for the Lions, but that's a tough needle to thread. You need really good offensive coaching. You need to have guys put very much into the best positions. You need to get the most out of your cheap skill position talent or your cheap pieces, period, the way that the Lions have. So I think you're trying to find a model that's where the Falcons, if they want to, the team that's in a position where the Falcons want to go, I would say it's what has happened with the Lions here over the last couple of years in acquiring Jared Goff and the direction they've gone from there.
Yeah, they're a little further along than when Goff got there.
For sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
So this is more like this year of the Lions and Goff and everything. That's, I think, because that's what the Falcons obviously want to push. You don't sign Kirk Cousins to kind of go like, 9-8. 10-7. No, this is the push and get a top 2 seed, host a playoff game. This is the type of thing you want to do.
The question now what for Minnesota? You missed out. Which direction are you ultimately going to go? Diana reported that Sam Darnold could be a bridge target for them, which makes sense. If they're not going to go for the guy who's going to be a needle mover in the way that Kirk is, you might as well shop all the way at the other end of the market if you want a stopgap guy. But eventually, they're going to need to go get a quarterback. They're going to need to go get a long-term answer at quarterback. Jefferson, Hawkinson, Darisaw, all those guys are at 25 to 27 right now. You're going to want the guy who is your plan, your long-term plan in there sooner rather than later. So in your mind, does them missing out on Cousins potentially give them even more urgency to try to come away with somebody in the top 10 of this year's draft?
It's nice that they have a natural stopgap in Darnold, I guess. If they like a guy, though, I think they commit to it. If they think they have an avenue to even get like a Drake May, now I'm just talking about JJ McCarthy or Jane Daniels, the non-Caleb guys. If they feel like they have an avenue to get into that range, and I know it's silly season right now, and it just seems you don't know who everybody likes, but everyone is, negging Drake May right now like a bad pickup artist. So that makes me think that he's everybody's guy, with everything like going on. But getting into that position, yeah, if they like the guy. If they don't, then I don't know. I've been a big believer in just like don't do it just to do it. That's why you sign the Darnolds of the world. Maybe you get a Geno out of that. That's what that's the new term for that. Maybe, oh shoot, or a Baker kind of situation. Like that's the dream. If not, okay, well then we get back to it next year, and we have a workable contract with Darnold, and maybe we get through the season, just go through that. So I don't think they have to, like absolutely have to, if they think they have a plan with these other guys being Darnold or just whatever have you, Jacoby Brissett of the world.
I'd never want you to take one just to do it, but my concern always with that, we'll find workable quarterback play. And let's say Darnold's pretty good, and then you were 10-7, and you're picking 18th again in a bad quarterback. It just puts you in a spot where it's going to be harder and harder to find your guy. This is the existential question facing a lot of these teams that are having to find imperfect answers at quarterback. And this is always going to be the case with Minnesota when they kept rolling with Kirk. It was always going to be difficult to find that off-ramp in the terms that you used. And that seems to be exactly where they are again. So how they come out of this offseason quarterback-wise is going to be one of the next big questions that we're going to have to answer.